If you filled up your gas tank this week, you already paid the Iran war tax. Here is the chain that connects a narrow strait on the other side of the planet to your grocery bill, and what the numbers actually say about how bad this gets. I'm Mr. Blobski. My tie is priced in dollars, not barrels. Let's follow the money. Between Iran and Oman, there is a stretch of water about 21 miles wide at its narrowest point. It is called the Strait of Hormuz, and it is, without exaggeration, the most important 21 miles of ocean on the planet for anyone who uses energy. In 2024, approximately 20 million barrels of oil and petroleum products pass through that strait every single day. That is roughly 20% of global oil consumption, more than a quarter of all seaborne oil trade in the world. Every day, about one-fifth of global liquefied natural gas exports also move through Hormuz, mostly from Qatar, going to Europe and Asia. Now here is the part that matters for the American angle. The United States imports only about 500,000 barrels a day through Hormuz, roughly 2% of our total consumption. We have our own shale production. We have Canada. We have pipelines that have nothing to do with the Persian Gulf. But none of that insulates you from what happens next, because oil has one global price, and when 20% of world supply gets disrupted, that price moves everywhere for everyone, including at the pump in Indiana. Before this conflict escalated, the forecast from the Energy Information Administration and most major banks was actually bearish on oil. They expected Brent crude to average around $58 to $60 per barrel through 2026. Global supply was growing, demand projections were modest. Then the shooting started. Within 1 week of the escalation, global oil prices jumped approximately 24%. Brent crossed $90. On the most volatile sessions, both Brent and WTI briefly touched the $110 range. Analysts at Reuters tracked the weekly move for WTI at over 35%, one of the largest weekly jumps since the early months of the pandemic. What happened in the actual strait? Attacks on tankers and infrastructure effectively blocked or rerouted a significant portion of Persian Gulf exports. Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Iraq, and Kuwait all had to hold barrels in storage or find alternative paths. Roughly 140 million barrels had to be redirected or warehoused while the situation was sorted out. The market added what traders call a risk premium, extra dollars per barrel that reflect not current supply disruption, but the fear of future disruption. That premium does not wait for the disruption to actually happen. It prices in the possibility immediately. So even before a single barrel of American oil became scarcer, the price of every barrel in the world went up, and that moves directly to your gas tank. Here is the math most people do not think about. American refineries buy crude oil at global market prices. When Brent moves, their input costs move with it, regardless of where that crude physically came from. And when their costs go up, they pass it through. Retail gas prices in the United States rose more than 10% within weeks of the oil price spike. In states like Indiana and West Virginia, the jump was over 40 cents per gallon in a short period. Analysts at GasBuddy projected that if oil prices held at current levels, the national average could reach $3.50 to $4 per gallon within weeks. There is also a seasonal factor that made this worse. Spring is when U.S. refineries typically switch from cheaper winter blend gasoline to the more expensive summer formulation. That transition alone usually adds 10 to 20 cents per gallon every year. The war hit right on top of this seasonal switch, compounding the increase. The mechanism is also slightly counterintuitive and worth understanding once. Even though the U.S. does not depend heavily on Middle Eastern oil physically, when global supply tightens, American producers and refiners have a stronger incentive to export their oil to higher-priced foreign markets. That reduces domestic supply, which pushes American prices up further. You are not just paying for Hormuz. You are paying for the export opportunity cost created by Hormuz. Oil is not just gasoline. This is the part where the pump price becomes a grocery store problem. Diesel moves every truck that delivers food to your supermarket. Oil is the feedstock for fertilizers, plastics, and synthetic materials in products you buy every week. Natural gas heats homes and powers a significant portion of the electric grid. When oil jumps 24% in a week, it does not stay at the gas station. Trucking companies raise rates. Manufacturers pay more for inputs. Farmers pay more to grow crops. Every step adds a fraction, and those fractions add up at checkout. Capital Economics estimated that if Brent reaches $100 and holds, it adds roughly half a percentage point to global inflation. After 26% cumulative inflation since 2020, another half a point is not an abstraction. It is another lap on a treadmill you are already tired of running. The severity depends almost entirely on duration. A 2-week spike is painful, but absorbed. 6 months above $90 starts affecting corporate earnings, consumer spending, and the Fed. Let me give you the range of scenarios without the drama. Base case from JP Morgan and Goldman Sachs. A $10 to $15 risk premium above baseline, then a gradual retreat towards $70 to $80 by late 2026 if the conflict does not escalate further. Americans feel a real but temporary squeeze. Gas a bit more expensive. Groceries up a few more percent. Annoying, not catastrophic. Hard scenario. A sustained Hormuz blockade lasting more than 3 weeks forces Gulf producers to cut output as storage fills up. JP Morgan modeled this as Brent potentially reaching $100 to $120 for an extended period. In that scenario, inflation resurges, the Fed faces a difficult choice, and the U.S. economy slows. A version of 1973, though analysts consistently note the U.S. is far less dependent on Middle Eastern oil today, which limits the severity. Nobody knows which scenario plays out. What matters is not predicting it. It is making sure your finances can handle the uncomfortable middle of either one. You already know the baseline numbers from earlier videos. Median household take-home around $43,000 to $44,000 after taxes. Not a lot of cushion for an unplanned recurring expense. Here is what the gas price increase alone does at the household level. If you use around 50 to 60 gallons of gasoline per month, a reasonable estimate for someone commuting regularly, a 50-cent increase per gallon costs you about $25 to $30 per month. A dollar per gallon increase costs you $50 to $60 per month. That is $600 to $720 per year that was not in your budget in January. Add the grocery and utility pass-through from higher diesel and energy costs, and the real total impact for a median household in a moderate scenario is somewhere between $50 and $150 extra dollars per month in unavoidable costs. For a household with 3 to 6 months of emergency savings and no high-interest debt, this is uncomfortable. For a household carrying credit card debt at 22% interest with no buffer, this is the kind of shock that tips people into the cycle we have talked about before, where they cover the gap with more debt, and the debt becomes the bigger problem than the oil price. The war did not create that vulnerability, it just exposed it. You cannot reopen the Strait of Hormuz. Here is what you can do. Rebuild your budget around the new numbers. If gas is 40 to 75 cents more per gallon than it was 6 months ago, that is now the price. Stop budgeting at the old number. Find the equivalent monthly increase, probably $30 to $100 depending on your driving, and identify where it comes from. Subscriptions, restaurant frequency, the upgrade you were thinking about but do not actually need yet. The money has to come from somewhere, and your credit card at 22% is the worst possible somewhere. Reduce the gas exposure where you actually can. Combine errands. Add 1 remote workday if your employer allows it. Carpool if it is realistic. Not because any single change transforms the math, but because the combination of small changes often covers the entire monthly increase without touching anything that actually matters to your quality of life. Do not stop your automatic investment contributions. I want to be direct about this. The temptation when costs go up is to pause the 401k contribution or stop the IRA deposit to free up cash. Do not do it. Energy shocks historically have been temporary. The compound growth you give up by stopping contributions, even for 3 months, is permanent. 30-year-old you stopping contributions because gas is expensive is 67-year-old you having a materially smaller retirement account. The math does not care about your reasons. Accelerate your emergency fund, not your debt. If this situation is revealing that your financial cushion is thin, the answer is to build it faster, not to lean harder on credit. Even adding $50 a month to your emergency savings meaningfully changes your resilience to the next shock, whatever it turns out to be. The broader point: the United States today produces more oil than at any point in its history. We import less from the Middle East than we did in 1973 by a massive margin. The scenario where this war creates an extended, economy-crushing energy crisis on the scale of 1973 requires a sustained, total blockade with no adaptation, and markets are already pricing in partial workarounds. What you are almost certainly facing is an uncomfortable but temporary squeeze, not an economic collapse. Your job is not to predict where oil goes from here. Your job is to make sure your finances are structured so that a 3-month, $50 per month shock does not derail a 20-year plan. That is a problem you can actually solve. I'm Mr. Blobski. My tie has not changed in price since 2019 because it is not made of oil. Or maybe it is. I have never checked. Keep your contributions running, close the leaks in your budget, and do not let the news convince you that managing your household finances is any less important when the world gets loud. Class dismissed.